Aloha and good morning. My name is Moorhead. I'm a board member for Hawaii EV, and I'm your host today. Welcome to our monthly EV talk story. This month's topic deals with the Hawaii Energy Commercial EV Charger Rebate Program. Before we begin, I'd like to ask that we all please mute our microphones unless we're speaking. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A after the presentations. If you have questions as we go along, feel free to drop those questions in the chat, and we'll be sure to address as many of them as possible during our session today. For those of you who are not familiar with Hawaii EV, we are a grassroots, all-volunteer, nonprofit coalition. We are focused on accelerating our transition to clean transportation here in our state. And we do this through education, support of a charging infrastructure build-out, and also policy advocacy. Our efforts are made possible through the contributions of a number of clubs across the state. We now have 4. There's Tesla Hawaii Club, which is a statewide organization, Big Island EV, focused here on Hawaii Island. Kauai EV, out there in Kauai, Maui Nui EV, newly formed. And to all the folks who are leading up these clubs, as well as their members, thank you very much for helping us with our mission. I also want to acknowledge a number of organizations that we have been partnering with to accelerate our transition to clean transportation. Drive Electric Hawaii, we have some representation here, Blue Planet Foundation, the Sustainable Transportation Coalition of Hawaii, the American Lung Association. I would like to say that we're the chapter of the Electric Auto Association. This is a group that's been around since the 60s, and they have been advocating for the acceleration of EV adoption across the US since that time. This is our program for today. We'll start off with highlights from our progress, as well as the recent legislative successes that are powering our decarbonization of transportation. And then we'll spend most of our time discussing the commercial EV charging station rebate. Let's see how we're progressing with our transition to clean transportation. So this chart utilizes DBET data. It shows changes in the number of registered passenger vehicles in our state by vehicle type over the past 5 years. As you can see, there is a nice increase in the number of electric vehicles. We're also seeing increases in hybrids and miscellaneous fuel vehicles. This bodes well for us. At the same time, we're seeing a drop in the number of fossil fuel vehicles. This, of course, is accelerating because EVs are becoming more popular, prices are dropping, driving ranges are increasing, and we're seeing a great number of models and makes out there. And I think that once we start to see the trucks, the Ford F-150 Lightning, the Tesla Cybertruck, and the Rivian, and many more, we'll start to see this accelerate even more in our state. That said, EVs are still less than 2% of our passenger vehicles, and we have over 1 million gas vehicles in our state, and we collectively burn 30 million gallons of gasoline every month. We contribute quite a bit to the emissions that we're supposed to addressing. So we have to address our progress here if we're to make a significant dent in our planet warming emissions, and it's important that we address barriers to adoption. And one of these barriers is the inadequacy of public charging. The great news is that we have passed laws recently that serve to enable clean transportation. Thanks to the efforts of our legislators, including Rep. Lowen and others, we passed a number of important bills in the last session. Among them is HB 1142, and this allows the counties to actually start to enforce the state law that was passed years ago, mandating the installation of EV parking and charging in large, publicly accessible parking structures. And in addition, that was mirrored with or partnered with the funding of the EV charging station rebate that we'll be discussing today. This is I'm sure you'll hear, this rebate has been around for a while, maybe a couple of years, and quickly ran out of funding. With 1142, there's now going to be sustained funding, which will come from the barrel tax. And I'm sure our friends at Hawaii Energy will be discussing this today. So before we jump into our panel, I'd like to just address the questions, because some some folks out there may ask, why do we need to invest in EV charging? After all, can't we just charge in our garage like many of us do? Like I have a couple of EVs. We plug in the garage and we don't have to worry about public charging. The fact is that while many of us have access to convenient home charging, many more, those who live in multi-unit structures like condos, apartments, and those who rent don't have this luxury. In order for them to adopt, we must have a robust, reliable, and accessible charging infrastructure. This will also be important for visitors who come here and would love to drive electric, but may not be able to because there's not enough charging. And of course, for those of us who have home charging, we sometimes have to top off. Like, when we travel from Hilo to Kona, we plug in to, top off before heading back. So by expanding our charging infrastructure, we're able to democratize the electric car. It allows us to achieve full transition away from fossil fuels by bringing in more and more of our community into sustainable transportation. So this brings us to our topic for today, the Hawaii Energy Commercial EV Charging Station Rebate Program. And I'd like to now introduce our panel for today. So first, we have Noreen Reimel. Noreen is a familiar face. She's manager of the external affairs for Hawaii Energy. She's responsible for developing and sustaining relationships with community members, with key stakeholders. She also represents Hawaii Energy and the Drive Electric Hawaii Coalition. In the past, she served as communications director for Blue Planet Foundation and also communication manager for Ulupono Initiative. Noreen's been driving EVs since 2015 and currently serves on the Tesla Hawaii Club board. Our next guest is Desiree Sumaoang. She is Business Alliances Advisor for Hawaii Energy. She also leads the Clean Energy Ally Program. She graduated from UH Manoa, where she received a BBA in Marketing and Management. Our next speaker is Jim Burness. He's founder and CEO and general manager of Aloha Charge and National Car Charging, and is considered one of the nation's leading electric vehicle and charging experts. With previous careers in both the automotive industry and renewable energy sector, he launched Aloha Charge in 2012 to facilitate the build-out of Hawaii's EV charging infrastructure in a wide variety of channels, including hospitality, municipal facilities, and multi-unit dwellings. Today, the company manages about 6,300 ports nationwide across 43 states. He's got offices here in Honolulu as well as Denver. I don't believe we have Amber with us today, so I am going to pass on Amber. I also, by the way, I noticed that Shawn with EverCharge is joining us as well. Shawn joined us in our last talk story, and he is with EverCharge and can probably contribute to the conversation during our Q&A. With that, I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn it over to Noreen.
Good. Hi, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday morning, and mahalo to Noel and the Hawaii EV Association for inviting Hawaii Energy to talk about our electric vehicle charging station rebate program. Yes, that is long, but that's what it's called. I'm Noreen. I'm the External Affairs Manager, and my colleague Desiree and I will be tag teaming this one, but I'd like to get us started. Give you a little background about Hawaii Energy. We are the energy efficiency program for the state of Hawaii. We've been around for about 12 years, and you probably know us best for our rebate programs. We provide rebates on things such as Energy Star appliances, lighting. If you're a business, we also work with large, small businesses, nonprofits on finding more energy efficiency systems so that they can lower their costs. And our mission, which is spelled out on this slide, is that we really want to help Hawaii families and businesses make smart energy choices so that they can lower not only their energy usage, but also lower their bills, and they can reinvest that money into whatever other priorities are. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the EV charging station rebate program for Hawaii Energy. And it actually started back in 2018 with a pilot program that Hawaii Energy partnered with Ulupono Initiative on. And at this time, I was actually with Ulupono Initiative, so I know this from that perspective. But we were interested in seeing, is there an audience? If there was a rebate, would people take advantage of it? Will they want to use the rebate to install EV charging systems on their property? And of course, this has to be publicly available. It's not just for private use or in someone's home. So back then it was a pilot program, and as you can see, we distributed 15 rebates, and that resulted in 21 level 2s installed. 20 of them were new, and one was a retrofit. Then came Act 142, which was funded by the legislature in 2019. That had a total of $400,000, and it expired this past June. It was a program that Hawaii Energy administered on behalf of the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission. And this program saw the installation of 61 EV charging stations. 13 were new level 2s, 47 were retrofitted, and there was one retrofitted DC fast charger. And so now we come upon where we currently are, which is Act 75, which was approved by the legislature this year. And as Noel mentioned, it's funded by a portion of the barrel tax. And, what this does is that it will provide a sustained funding source for us. And it kicked off in July of this year. And we currently have $163,000 for this year. We operate like on a fiscal year, so like from a July to June. That's what we call our program year. So for this program year, we have 163,000. And for subsequent program years, we're still waiting for the PUC to let us know how much that is. But we've heard anywhere from like 600 to 700,000 possibly. So that is really exciting. And for both the previous program and this program, Hawaii Energy and Ulupono Initiative partnered again to offer an affordable housing bonus. This means that for affordable housing developers, to encourage them to install EV charging in their development on their properties, they would get the regular rebate, and then there's a bonus that they would get on top of that to help cover extra costs. And Desiree will go more into that. I just wanted to highlight a couple of the customers who were able to take advantage of our rebate programs to show you the variety of people who have benefited from this. And from the pilot rebate program, one of the beneficiaries was Kupu. They're a nonprofit based here in Honolulu, and they were featured on Living 808, which is the screenshot you see here. And what was great for like nonprofits, is that they're able to, also charge and encourage, their employees and their staff to drive electric. And then from this past rebate program, this is Moana Lua Shopping Center based here on Oahu. It's near the airport and Pearl Harbor. And this is an example of a retailer that had an existing level 2 that was years old and saw the rebate as an opportunity to upgrade their system. So as you can see here, they chose the charge point, and Jeff Dinsmore represents their landlord, which is great to see that they're embracing EV charging for their customers. As you can see in his quote, he said that, they know that, we're going to stay there for a while. It's not like we can gas up and leave. And that they recognize that it's an opportunity to get some customers to visit their retailers. So while I was there talking to Jeff, I stopped by the Starbucks, or you might want to check out Jean's Warehouse, or, go see Panda Express, or whatever is around. And I know that for me and my family, when we're out and about, we do, look for properties that have charging. and we do want to support their retailers. So I'm glad to see that we have a landlord in the retail segment who is sees the benefit of this, and so this is I'm happy to share this with you. And I'm going to pass it along to Desiree to talk about where we currently are.
All right, thanks, Noreen. Hi, everyone. Happy Saturday. I'm Desiree Sumaoang. So I'll just be going over some of like the key items around the current EV charging station rebate. So just a high-level overview. On June 24th, Act 75 was signed by Governor Ige just to continue funding the EV charging station rebate program. As Noreen mentioned earlier, there is only $163,000 of funding for this program year. So our program year began on July 1st and will end on June 30th, 2022. The rebate offering is available for any commercial facility. So if you're a nonprofit or a for-profit corporation, if you're a government agency, a homeowner association, or like a multi-unit dwelling like condos and AOAOs, you are eligible for this program. So some of the key highlights, key changes for this program actually is that our rebates will be offered on a first come, first served basis, and funding will not be reserved for this round of funding. We also we are not requiring pre-approval. However, it is highly encouraged. Next slide, please. All right, so there are two types of EV charging stations that will qualify for the EV charging station program. The first are level 2 stations. So two basic requirements for level 2 stations are, first, they must have 2 ports, and the second is that they must be networked stations. So the rebate amounts for level 2 stations are, for new installs, it is $4,500. For station retrofits, it is a $3,000 rebate. And if you are a affordable housing property serving households in Hawaii making no more than 100% of the area median income, there is an affordable housing bonus. So it's a bonus on top of the the standard rebate amounts. There is a rebate cap of up to 6 level 2 EV charging station rebates per site. Next slide. All right, so the second EV charging station type that will qualify for this program are DC fast charging stations. There's only one basic requirement for it, and it's that it must be a networked station. We have two types of rebate offerings. The first is for new installs, and that is a $35,000 rebate. And the second are for station retrofits, and it's $28,000. For DC fast chargers, the rebate cap is 2 DC fast chargers per customer, but 1 per site. Next slide. Okay, so there are a few key updates for the EV charging station program. We still require regulatory signage that's indicating EV charging station parking stall usage and whatnot. It's still required for all EV charging station installs. However, if your EV charging station install is for private fleet charging where the station is only accessible by authorized personnel, you are exempt from this requirement. Next slide. So due to limited funding, we will not be reserving funds for this round. Rebates will be dispersed on a first come, first served basis as projects are completed. All right, so pre-approval is not required for the purchase and install of your EV charging station. However, it is highly encouraged just to confirm that funds are available and also to verify that your EV charging station project meets our minimum requirements for an incentive. Okay, so if you are interested in installing EV charging station or in the process of installing one, this is how you can apply for a rebate. The first is that you must complete and sign an EV charging station application. You can download it from our website. The second is to sign and submit a current W-9 tax form. The third is to submit product specification sheets. Your contractor or vendor will be able to provide this document for you. Fourth item is we do require a final invoice just to verify the equipment that was purchased as well as the installation. If you are seeking pre-approval, you can submit a scope of work or a proposal. And the last thing that we require are photos of your installed EV charging station. So photos of the unit, the required signage, as well as just generally the parking stalls that are reserved for the stations. And then you can also, lastly, you can email your documents directly to me. My email is on the screen, desiree.sumaoang@leidos.com. Next slide. All right, so we have a website that you can always refer to for the latest updates. There is a tracker that is updated regularly. You can see that we do have 100% of our funds left. Next slide. All right, so if you're unsure of how to get started, I highly recommend contacting a couple of our clean energy allies. We have allies who specialize in EV charging stations and can assist you with the installation of your EV charging station. Next slide. All right, so that's the end of me and Noreen's presentation. If you have any questions, our contact information is on your screen.
Desiree and Noreen, thank you very much for that. Really appreciate all that detail. I'm sure that there'll be some questions here from our audience, and we'll take those after Jim has had his chance to share. Jim, it's all yours.
Hi, good morning, everybody, and thanks for having me here today. Wanted to just introduce Aloha Charge. And Amber has a very good excuse. It is her birthday weekend, and knowing her family, they probably kidnapped her and took her somewhere with very little cell service. So you get me instead today, but she did send her regrets. Aloha Charge has been around for, the parent company's been around for on our 10th year right now. But we wanted to really enter the Hawaiian market a long time ago because the history of EV charging in Hawaii has been pretty ugly, with a lot of bad decisions that have been made throughout the years. Many of you probably know this history, but first came along Better Place that said, hey, we'll put all these free charging in, and then they went belly up after burning through $400 million. AeroVironment put in a whole bunch of DC fast chargers that quickly were no longer supported. Another company bought the Better Place assets, but didn't really have the funding to keep the stations up and running. So one of the things that is very important to us at Aloha Charge is we're really, really picky about the brands and the manufacturers that we carry. We require every manufacturer we work with to meet a couple of criteria. First off, they need to be safety listed, which sounds like a no-brainer, but this is an industry growing so fast. There is a ton of new product coming in from overseas that is just bypassing the whole safety listing process, which can take up to a year to get listed. Two, they have to have a track record of reliability. It doesn't help anybody, including ourselves, to put in a piece of junk that needs service down the road. Three, and this is something that we really take very seriously, is they have to be financially stable. So we don't want to see orphaned units out there. If you take a look at our portfolio, you'll find that almost all of the brands that we carry are either public companies, divisions of huge utilities, worldwide manufacturers. So we take very seriously the idea that we don't want any orphans out there in the future, either now or in the distant future. And then lastly, we try to make sure that all the products we carry have a particularly good value or a unique feature set. We try to avoid duplication in the portfolio, just to make sure that things are simple. But we do have everything from basic home units all the way to the 350 kilowatt units that can charge Porsche Taycan about the same time that it takes to fill up a car with liquid fuel. So one thing that has been fantastic is we've done a lot of work with Hawaii Energy. I have to say they're really great to work with. The program is really easy, which we can't say with all the programs that are out there. But the Hawaii Energy program is really well designed. And one of the things I really like about it is that it does have that trade-in element, that upgrade element, because we do see a lot of dead chargers out there. We do see a lot of unmaintained units out there. So to be able to combine the rebate along with some trade-in programs that some of our manufacturers offer, like ChargePoint, they're the biggest in the nation. They have about 70% market share. They have a specific trade-in program that you can get hardware for $4,000. You get the rebate for $3,000, and then really your only costs are the labor, taxes, shipping, and a couple extra years of networking and warranty should you decide you need it. Which means that the marketplace near the airport that Noreen showed, it was a very easy upgrade for them. And they got rid of some stations that have been troublesome for years, and now they have some units that have been working well, and they get a lot of traffic. So it's that's something, again, that is really important to us, is to make sure that the only products we offer are quality products. And we do have 7 manufacturers. One of the things that I think is really important is if you only have one brand, you fall into that old saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think it's important to have the whole toolbox. So that's also something that we bring to the table. And then we have installation resources that we can deploy across the entire state. We like to say that we're installer agnostic. And what we mean by that is some of our clients have the wherewithal and the ability to do all the installations themselves. Other clients say, we don't know where to start, please help us. And so we'll bring an installer to the party. And sometimes the work is divided somewhere in the middle there. So whatever is best for the project is the way that we approach that. So it's, and we'll do the permitting for you, what we can bring in engineers, we can make it a very easy process for you. It's just a question of what you want to achieve. So that's a little bit about us. I can tell you a little about the process. If it's a trade-in, it actually can be really easy. Basically, since something is already there, we might ask for a couple pictures of the electrical panel so that we know what kind of breaker we're using. We'll probably bring in a new breaker just to make sure that there's no problem down the road. If it is a new construction or a retrofit, then we will do a site walk that will actually produce a hard quote for the installation. And those are a little bit more difficult, but I'm glad to say if you were on Talk Story, I think the last session or the one before that, it was mentioned that HECO is coming out with a program, assuming the PUC approves it, that will be able to subsidize a lot of that underground infrastructure work that can be the biggest barrier to projects getting done. They're very excited about it. They think that they're going to get approval, and that is a program that is about as impactful as anything else in making sure that projects get done. So if you are looking at an issue where your infrastructure is not adequate, rest assured that there's a very good chance there's going to be a program out there to help you with that very soon. So I think with that, I want to. The other thing I was going to mention is that because we have all these different brands out there, we really are trying to make sure that we tailor the solution to the customer's needs, which means that if you're in a commercial situation, we're going to make sure you get a commercial grade charger, not necessarily a residential grade unit that's being applied to a commercial situation. So we want to make sure that you get exactly the right system for your needs. So with that, I think I'll pause for a minute and would love to see what questions are out there.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Really appreciate all that detail. I think what we'll now do is transition into discussion. I'm sure there are questions out there that folks might have. I also just wanted to also acknowledge Shawn. Shawn, if you have a few things that you'd like to share, and actually this I do have a question for both of you, and that is based on your engagement with commercial property owners and all these different clients that have engaged with you, what are some of the key lessons, things to look out for, things that a would-be EV charger host will need to look into? I know, Jim, based on what you just described, ensuring that a solution is a best fit for a certain client, is one thing. But what are some of these key things that would-be hosts need to consider, based on the lessons that you've seen? So, Jim, maybe I'll start with you, and then Shawn, I'll turn it over to you as well.
Sure. Over the last decade, we've seen the biggest challenge historically is capacity. One of the things that we see, especially in Honolulu with some of the older apartment buildings, they ran out of capacity when air conditioning was installed. And so to add EV charging, usually there is a significant upgrade that needs to be put in. Even with the fact that a lot of our products have power sharing capabilities that allow multiple charges to be used on a single circuit. But many of the buildings we encounter don't even have that ability yet. So again, that's why I'm really excited about the HECO program and hoping that the PUC gives it the green light, because that will help bring in new service to some of these properties. That seems to be the biggest challenge. And then the other one that we see is property owners that may not understand how fast this is coming, and so they say, "Oh, well, I'll do it later. Maybe next year or the year after." And then Noel, you and I were talking briefly before everything got started. There's also often a disconnect between landlord and tenant in a commercial setting. Is the tenant may hear from their employees, "We want to be able to charge at work, etc." The landlord isn't getting that message and thinks, "Well, what's in it for me? I don't get it yet." That if there's some tax credits that are coming down the road, that often will help bridge that gap between the landlord and the tenant.
Thank you, Tim.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, and thanks, Noel, for having me on today, and great to see the Hawaii Energy team again, and you too, Jim. Great to see you. So EverCharge Hawaii, we do electric vehicle charging across the state as well. Unlike Jim, I think the biggest difference is that we manufacture our own chargers in-house and then also provide the service on those chargers. So, our main differentiation is probably that Jim has a real vast array of products to offer, whereas we come in with our specific product and stand behind it, being because we manufacture it ourselves and provide the service on that charger ourselves as well. So, you have a host of options here, and there's a different charging service and different product for each application. So I would encourage you to just take a look at exactly what you're trying to accomplish with your charging system and give everybody an evaluation to determine the best for you. Like Jim mentioned, we really try to customize systems specifically for the use case. So most of our chargers are deployed in multi-unit commercial and residential environments. That's really where our sweet spot is. On the single family home side, we recommend solutions like those found in the Aloha Charge pamphlet. For us, we really focus on that multi-unit environment. And the reason for that is our chargers can all talk to each other in a way that optimizes the infrastructure. So as Jim very correctly pointed out, the biggest issue in a lot of these locations where we're trying to deploy chargers is electrical capacity. Most of the building stock in Hawaii was built over 30 years ago, and that means that we just didn't plan to have EV chargers in the garage at some point or in the parking area, so electricity wasn't wired out there. So we have to overcome that issue of not having electricity where folks need to charge, and in order to do that, we have to use the existing infrastructure in the most optimal way we can. So the charging systems can be designed to really accomplish whatever goal the property is looking to accomplish. And in particular, to add on to Jim's message there and also Noel's question, the biggest question property owners face is whether they want to provide free charging as an amenity at the location, whether it's to attract new customers to their commercial property or whether they want to serve their residents with an additional amenity that's similar to a pool or a gym, but it's kind of an EV charging offering. So the question is, should it be free for your clientele or your customer base or your residents, or do you want to charge for that service, and how do you want to charge for that? There's ways ways that we can structure the service to generate revenue to help you return your investment, or on the residential side, the revenue generated can go to fund other projects. Like we have one property that was having piping issues throughout the building, and we deployed charging stations, and the revenue generated went to solve some of those plumbing issues on the property. So there's different ways the system can be structured to accomplish those goals. But I think the biggest problem is generally capacity, and the way that we can operate our software and power optimization is how we overcome a lot of those issues.
I'm gonna. There were a number of questions that were raised in the chat. I'm just gonna go through them, and pardon me if I missed anything. Just call me out if that's the case. So one question that comes out of Kauai: can co-ops like KIUC, Kauai's PowerGov, lifeguards, police qualify for the rebate?
Yes, I can answer that question. Yes, Kauai County is eligible for this rebate, so any commercial facility in all our counties can qualify.
Thank you.
I can actually share a really simple but funny story. Theoretically, HECO would also qualify, but their projects are so big that they have said, we know it'd be bad PR to suck up all the funding, so they have decided not to apply for the rebates.
I'm going to go down the list here. I've taken notes off to the side. So one of the given the challenge with power, are microgrid solutions a possibility? There are some of these providers that will actually install the charging infrastructure, but also storage and solar as a way for standalone systems to exist and not have to be dependent on linking up to the grid. Are those in play? I don't think so, but I just wanted to raise that with the team.
Certainly, I can jump in with that one if anyone else doesn't mind there. But in many cases, our charging systems are deployed alongside solar and sometimes even batteries. If there's solar on the property, that solar energy is going to be used across that property. It's going to be prioritized before that property pulls any electricity from the grid. So when you deploy charging stations alongside a property that has solar, as long as your solar is generating electricity, that solar should be feeding those charging stations, which is great. We want to ensure that the charging stations are providing energy that is, generated renewably and not pulled from the grid where it was generated by the use of fossil fuels. So that's a really good thought there, to have solar and charging stations together. And an even additional benefit there is if you have storage on site, because your solar can then charge the battery, so that when your chargers are pulling from that property's electricity, you could be using renewable energy 24/7, not just when the solar is being generated. And even so much so, HECO has a program right now out where they're providing a tax credit and a rebate, I think, for deploying a battery alongside solar, as long as you're willing to either sell that electricity back to the grid between 6 and 8 p.m. or use that electricity from your battery between 6 and 8 p.m. So we've put together a number of offerings with a few solar companies here where, instead of giving that electricity back to the grid and getting paid for it, you actually have a better use case of discharging that battery to an EV charger during that 6 to 8 p.m. timeframe. So, I would say integration with other renewable sources on site at a property and adding charging, it's a match made in heaven.
Like Shawn, we see a lot of co-location with solar. There is a product out there that has about 12 solar modules, a battery, and a charger that can be deployed virtually anywhere. And I'm an ex-solar guy, so I'm very curious about this kind of thing. The downside is that it is very expensive, and the battery is not big enough to really serve more than 1 or 1.5 cars in a given day. Having said that, we are seeing a tremendous amount of development in storage, with a lot of exciting announcements that are going to be coming, I think, in 2022, that will make storage a lot easier, a lot cheaper, and will also help offset some of that. But I would say we're almost there to make it economically viable, but not quite.
And for Noreen and Desiree, would any of this be covered, or would it just be the charging station component? I believe that's it, right? So someone has a solar system, and they want to be able to leverage that energy for EV charging. The rebate would cover the EV chargers, but the rest of the system would be sort of divorced from that. Is that the right way to interpret?
Yes, yes. Our program is specifically for EV charging stations.
Okay, thank you.
But jumping in there, I have seen a number of properties actually take advantage of the EV charging station rebate and Hawaii Energy's energy efficiency lighting rebate. I've heard multiple times how beneficial that's been for a number of sites, because if an electrician is already out there on site doing an EV charger installation, it makes a lot of sense to have them do the energy efficiency lighting upgrade, and then 2 rebates can be captured on the same site. So that's been hugely beneficial, just passing that along to the Hawaii Energy team.
Yeah. I mean, to build on that, if you are doing a lighting retrofit, you may be able to free up some capacity to
Great
add
point.
EV charging. One other point that we still had in the chat, but I think is important to bring up here, is that for-profit entities can actually take advantage of the 30% federal tax credit on top of all this. So that makes the savings even better. Theoretically, that expires at the end of this year, but with the current administration in Washington, I expect it to be renewed like it has been the last couple of years.
Agree. Yeah, well said, Jim.
And then one question I saw in the chat, if I could steal Noel's thunder a little bit, we don't know what the Biden administration is going to do with this big pot of funding that is being talked about. No word yet about how that's going to be distributed out there. I'm hoping that it just goes out to the states, and the states make their own decisions, but there are no details yet.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think Heather had that question. So there's a lot happening in Washington, and we're very hopeful that that a lot of that would translate into funding for a variety of infrastructure projects, including those that are necessary for us to decarbonize. So fingers crossed that we'll start to see some of that come to fruition. There is a question in the chat. I'm in a small gated condo community in Waikoloa Village. How can we encourage local public shopping centers to get on board? Installing a personal station is logistically challenging in condo complexes. Our HOA is not in favor of an installation. So how do we, anyone on the team, how do we encourage adjacent local, public shopping centers? And I believe there are, including a large one that's actually being built. How do we ensure that these things are installed?
Sure. Well, any new commercial environments being built in Honolulu are under the Bill 25 provision. So they actually, by law, have to have a certain number of charging stations on the property, or a certain amount of infrastructure deployed to support the installation of future charging stations. So that's kind of been one thing the County of Honolulu has done to enforce that. But in order to entice commercial properties, as Jim will tell you as well, I think you really have to point to the increase in customer traffic that those sites will get as a result of having chargers there. If there are 2 chargers in a commercial parking lot, you're going to have cars cycling in and out. And if there's a coffee shop there, or a place to get lunch, or a small boutique shopping center, folks are going to pop into those locations while they're charging their vehicle, and that's just, everybody wins from that. And then secondly, I'd also say that we don't encourage a massive upcharge on the hourly cost of EV charging, but if a property wants to build in a 25% or 25-cent property usage fee that goes back to them to help them pay off their investment and then generate a little additional revenue by way of charging, that speaks directly to their wallet. And I think in a lot of cases for commercial property owners, that helps the conversation along. Jim, I bet you have some similar anecdotes.
Yeah, I would say in this scenario, a couple things. One is that I think the new HECO infrastructure program, EV Make Ready program, would certainly help. The $35,000 DC fast charge rebate would certainly help. They should be able to take advantage of 30% federal tax credit. But as Shawn said, there is data that EV drivers will stay longer, spend more. For instance, through ChargePoint, Target was able to figure out that their EV drivers spend twice as much money in the store as their non-EV drivers, which is a huge benefit. So well outweighs the cost of electricity. Their policy is give away, I think, the first 2 hours and then start charging after that. And if you're in Target for more than 2 hours, there are other issues there. The situation that you're talking about on the Big Island, the challenge is going to be trying to figure out, do we need to get buy-in from the management company first and then go to the landlord, assuming they're not the same entity, because really it's a double sales process. If either of those two has some resistance, then it's going to be more difficult. But with some of the new legislation about parking lot size, et cetera, hopefully that becomes an easier conversation.
Yeah. And I'd also like to point out, too, that there is a mandate. There is a law that is in place that requires every commercial property to have at least one EV charger for 100 stalls. And this is for any public parking lot across the state. That law was, I think, written in 2013 or 2012, and it's been in place ever since. But the issue is there's no enforcement entity, so no one is actually going out to these properties to make sure that they're in compliance. And then secondly, there's no penalties. So even if you're not in compliance, what happens? But the good news is the state recently passed another law that also gave the funding to the Hawaii Energy team here to keep this EV charging rebate program going. But also a part of that was a statute that gave counties the leeway to come up with an enforcement and penalty structure to ensure that properties are in compliance with statute 291-71, which is the requirement of one charging station per 100 stalls at each commercial property. And in addition to that, it also set the goal to increase that amount to 5 charging stations in the next coming years per 100 total stalls, and then 10 charging stations per 100 stalls, I think by 2030. I may have that year incorrect, but the point there is that the state is doing their best to ensure that these commercial entities do provide charging stations, and that they want to make a compliance factor involved there to give that extra push wherever they can.
So I'd like to ask Noreen as well. Noreen and Desiree. It sounds like there's an opportunity to help market benefit, right? So there are a number of key messages that have come out of this conversation. One is that there's a law out there that mandates the installation of these charging stations, right? And then there's another piece, which is we've got financial, subsidies, the rebate, tax credits, et cetera, that can help offset the cost. And then the last piece, which is another major carrot, is the actual benefit of having, happy customers that linger, customers that spend more. It sounds like there's some data there that we can kind of all package together as you'd be in the out crowd if you didn't embrace this and make this thing happen on your property. So I'm just curious as to whether or not there is an effort to have that that win-win messaging out there that can help get more people on board.
Yeah, I can speak to that. And I know, Noel, your organization is doing a lot for promoting this. And for Hawaii Energy, we specifically want to promote our program. And so we appreciate this opportunity to spread our message. But also, as part of Drive Electric Hawaii Coalition, there's a number of us who have been working on messaging for years, and this is not a new a new argument. It's a talking point that we've been working with for a long time. And I know that the Blue Planet Foundation and the Stitch has been leading the efforts for the outreach and communications for the Drive Electric Hawaii Coalition. I think what we see, especially when it comes to policy issues, and that's when you see a lot of the testimony come up from those who are not in support of EV friendly policy, is that there are the arguments of like from the Retail Merchants Association, who say that EV charging, it just takes up space, people just sit in their cars. And I think, going back to what Shawn and Jim has said, is that, retailers like the Moanalua Shopping Center, they see the value of it. And, that charge point one is not free. I paid for it, but that's fine with me as an EV driver. I think most of us are willing, to pay for it. I mean, as a gas driver, you don't expect your gas to be free. So
Yeah.
I'm okay with paying for it as well. So yeah, for us, another thing that we want to focus on is just making EV charging just more accessible to more communities. And that's really why we have our affordable housing rebates. People might think, well, people who live in those developments, the last thing on their mind is getting an electric vehicle. But with a lot of secondhand EVs on the market, and the prices coming down, and just it might be the only option in their future. And so we want to encourage those developments to offer EV charging on their properties, which is why we have the bonus rebate, or out in communities that aren't in the urban core, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm not a representative of Hawaiian Electric, but we do work closely with them. And I'm not sure if you saw, but they just launched their Charge Up Hawaii campaign, which is an interactive map, and you can drop a pin on where you want to see charging. And it's pretty cool. Like, so if I live out in East Honolulu, if I want to be able to get to West Oahu, and it's a little more than my little Kia Soul can get me there, I'll put the little pins all around. So I'll leave the website link. This is, again, a Hawaiian Electric program, not a Hawaii Energy program, but it's great that there are these kinds of opportunities to get input from the public. So I encourage everybody to look into it and take part.
Thank you. Just on that point, and it's something that we certainly, as an organization, endorse, is to get for EV owners to express their desires, their concern. So if there's a broken EV charger in a certain shopping center or a certain location, a fatalistic, it's been like that forever. Que sera, sera. That doesn't get anywhere, right? That doesn't get us anywhere. But if we band together, we say, hey, property owner, you can get that fixed. Here's a rebate program that you can leverage to make it happen. Something like that. And this goes back to the question that was posed about Waikoloa Village. There are quite a few EV owners out there. We can get together and bring the need to the attention of the shopping center, property manager, business owners, and so on and so forth to make things like that happen. And Shawn, I appreciate the note about the HB 1142 and its its call to action for the county. We actually have, I think Heather may be still with us here, but we've been working with Heather on coming up with precisely that. So coming up with changes to the code so that we can actually enforce the charging station parking rules here, but not only here, across the the different counties. And Heather, if you'd like, you're welcome to make a comment on that. Feel free.
Yeah, thanks, Noel. I do want to just mention that we are working on that county level enforcement and penalties. And for Hawaii County, we are being a little bit more aggressive. Rather than the 1 per 100, it's 1 per 50. And the piece of legislation that we're developing also sets targets for future years. So it's going to be 2 chargers by 2025, 3 chargers by 2028, and then 4 by 2030. And where we are at this stage is the bill has been drafted. Corporation Council has looked at it. LRB has looked at it, and Planning Department, which will be the enforcing agency, has reviewed it. Our next step is to send it out to the business community to get their feedback, and we're hoping to introduce this sometime in October. So please, if you can pay attention, Noel, I'm sure we'll put out calls to action when it's time to provide testimony to support this when it's before the Hawaii County Council. I have been in contact with members of the other county councils who are also interested in collaborating to introduce similar bills in their counties. Thanks, Noel, for the opportunity to share.
Thank you.
Heather,
Thank you.
if I can jump in here, when the time comes, please let us know. We testified very strongly in support of Bill 25 in Honolulu, and we'd be happy to come testify in support of the efforts there on the Big Island.
Thank you so much. We will certainly do that.
Great.
Okay. So we're 5 minutes to wrap up here. And I think there may have been just one other question, more a concern about international shortages of materials and a concern that this may have an impact to, what we do. Does anyone have a quick response to that? Maybe a minute response?
Sure, I can give just a 30-second response there. And that's, we source all of our materials sustainably wherever possible. So I know that there's a massive environmental cost to, building chips and rare earths that go into the EV chargers. So, because we're a manufacturer of our own charging equipment, we stock our warehouse way ahead of time so that these kind of shortages don't impact us. And then we also try to, we build in the US. So our manufacturing facility sources all of its materials locally wherever we possibly can. So that's kind of just a quick address from EverCharge on that.
And we obviously keep track of what's going on with manufacturers we work with, but also hear a lot about some of the other manufacturers on the market. And some are seeing some significant delays, but some have made plans that mean that the assembly lines are still rolling, still just a couple weeks to get it onto your site. So it really depends on which manufacturer we're talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Noel, if I might say one thing that does hold up a lot of these projects, unfortunately, permitting. The Department of Permitting and Planning here in the city and county of Honolulu does take, between 1 and 3 months sometimes to get back to responding to an electric vehicle charging permit where there might have been none previously existing. So actually, one thing that EverCharge is hoping to do is help grease the wheels for that process in the same way that years ago solar permits took a long time, but now it's a relatively easy filing online. And I know that the city and county and the state are actually working on that as well. So I think that's actually a larger bottleneck to the deployment of EV chargers, probably the biggest bottleneck, and Jimmy might agree as well, just to getting chargers deployed in a quick and reasonable fashion.
Yes,
we will.
I think it's fair to say it's not just EV charging, but pretty much anything going through the permit process right now.
Yes, agreed.
And that would be a great subject for a 2 or 3 hour talk story down the road.
Yeah, we could definitely fill some time on that one.
We'll bring that up in a future conversation. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to announce that in September we have National Drive Electric Week. So we're not going to, in lieu of a regular talk story, we're actually going to be hosting a webinar, maybe a couple webinars. And Kiani is here with us as well with Blue Planet, and she and I are collaborating with others on events that we can host. Unfortunately, because of COVID, all these plans for like rallies and parades and all these different things are not going to be possible. And it's just the problems accelerating every day here as far as the COVID counts go. So what we're going to do, Hawaii EV is going to be focused on some virtual events. Kiani, looking forward to working with you on that. What we're hoping to do is have nice representation from EV owners across the islands so that we can actually tell the story. And there's so many different messages that we want to convey, right? There's the equity piece, there's the environmental piece, there's the the various benefits of ownership and so on and so forth. So look forward to productive event and informational event for the Drive Electric Weekend celebration. We did get I'm socializing this prematurely, but Governor Ige did send a proclamation that September is going to be Drive Electric Month for the state, and we're working with the various counties as well for Drive Electric Week for the last week of September. So I really appreciate everybody's support for sustainable transportation. It's not just about electric cars, by the way. We've got to reduce the number of cars on the road. We've got to do mass transit. We've got to do a whole bunch of stuff. And that's just a small part of the actions that we need to take to address the climate crisis. So I appreciate everyone's concern and focus and action that we're taking to help ensure that future generations have, a livable world, something that, they can thrive in. So thank you very much, everyone. And until next time, aloha.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Mahalo, everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
And you too. Aloha.
Thanks, Noel. Have a great one.
Okay, you too. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Noel. Nice
Aloha.
to see you.
Likewise. Take care. Bye, everyone.